last 25 years, I've had the privilege of interviewing and highlighting some truly interesting people. Everyone who is anyone, both the famous and the infamous, from presidents and their first ladies to kings and queens, movie stars and pop stars, captains of industry, heads of state, sports personalities, innovative entrepreneurs, and some pretty fascinating everyday people. Today, I'm proud to introduce you to Dr. Gordon MacKinnon, a clinical psychologist who attributes his success to his interest in people's stories and, of course, his ethics. Dr. MacKinnon, it's a pleasure to meet you today. Good afternoon, sir. And I just guess we should just start. How did you get your start as a clinical psychologist?
Well, that's an interesting story, actually, because I started my career as a graphic artist and illustrator for the automotive industry. It's interesting how it came about because I was working on the board and I decided to go into marriage and family therapy. So I started school, but I did school at night and was working during the day as an illustrator. Interestingly, I got placed at General Motors, and it was interesting because during my training on a Sunday in 1987, a plane crashed in Detroit, and a little girl, age 4, was the only sole survivor of that crash. As a result, I didn't think much of it. It was a plane crash. I went to work on Monday, and interestingly enough, it turns out that four of the engineers I worked with were on the flight and lost their lives. One, his whole family was gone.
Wow.
Additionally, we had an engineer who came in from New York every week. He was on the plane. And then one of the engineers who worked like kitty corner from me, he was supposed to be on the plane and missed the flight.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so everybody started, since I'm training to be a psychologist, a marriage and family therapist at the time, they were all asking me about, the guilt. He felt guilt because he should have been on the plane.
Survivor's guilt is something that I think people have heard the whole concept of.
Yeah. And so that was very interesting. From that, I went into the ministry shortly after that. And I decided at that point that I was very interested in the stories that people told about their lives, the way that they constructed and gave meaning to their own lives. And that prompted me to end up going into my PhD for clinical psychology. So I ended up having my work in marriage and family therapy and clinical psychology. So I work with couples and individuals, and I have a pretty general psychological practice.
It's interesting because you said you went into the ministry. A lot of people would say that it's just another area of psychology because it really and truly requires you to be connected to other human beings and in a spiritual and an emotional and a physical way. And so it seems as if everything around your career was leading you to the path of where you ultimately ended up.
Yeah.
So Dr. MacKinnon, I know that you're a clinical psychologist in private practice. Tell me what your specialties are, sir.
Well, I've had a pretty long career, and I've been meeting with individuals. I have a general practice, but I've met with individuals, families, couples. But the areas that I've been drawn to have been like psychological stress, trauma, with a specific, well, I should go into this story as well. In 2005, I was diagnosed with prostate cancer. And so from that, I began working with cancer patients, cancer survivors, and their spouses. And I have a particular interest in how cancer affects the family system and the marital system. and how and helping couples kind of find ways to communicate and to open spaces up between them during the cancer journey. Many men close themselves off to their spouses and their families, and I try to help them to offer support and help the cancer survivor to express their vulnerabilities.
That makes a lot of sense. Again, it's the connection, it's the human connection to whatever the person's story is. Sir, what would you consider to be the most rewarding aspect of your work?
Well, I've worked with a lot of adolescents, and I worked in a long-term residential facility with very disturbed and behaviorally disordered adolescents. And in working with them, a lot of professionals didn't give them much hope for being productive members of society. But I've had several success stories that way, in which I just stayed with them, listened, helped them to understand where they're at and where they could go. And consequently, I've kept up with a couple of them, several of them actually, and they're doing fairly well. They have jobs, they have families, they are productive in that sense.
That's really great. I mean, to be able to help a person through a traumatic time and see them come out the other end has to be tremendously rewarding. And I see, sir, that you've spent 23 years so far as a professor of psychology at Rochester University. What do you think has been the secret behind your longevity there? A lot of people are not staying at the same place for over 20 years anymore.
Right. Well, it's the institution that I graduated from. And I think the main thing that has sustained me through these years is working with students, watching students grow. Students who I thought really might not have a chance, who did blossom during their 4 years. In addition to that, I've had a good number of students who've gone on to earn PhDs from my psychology program. I was the chair of psychology for a good number of years. I just gave that up. And then I've also established and run the clinic on campus, the psychology and counseling clinic. Interestingly, I think my patients teach me maybe sometimes a lot more than I teach them. You know?
That's a wonderful thing. I mean, and it's a testament to your ability to continually learn, even in an area of expertise where you are clearly an expert.
Yeah, and I see the psychotherapy relationship as a relationship. I'm not the power broker. I have some ideas to share and some alternative ways of thinking, but I work with my patients as though we're in a relationship together.
That makes such good sense. So, thinking about the 20 some odd years that you've been a professor of psychology at Rochester University, what has been the proudest moment of your career, sir?
Well, there's probably several, actually. First was getting my PhD. I'm the first one in the family to get a PhD. And that was a very proud moment for me and my family. Secondly, though, at Rochester University, I received the Distinguished Faculty of the Year Award in 2014. The clinic that I established in 2005, in 2017 was renamed after me, a humbling experience, I have to tell you. So I've been very humbled by that, and that's been important to me, as well as the things I've done in building up our department.
That would make me extremely proud. So, sir, you should definitely wear that as a badge of honor, and I appreciate humility. But clearly, your colleagues and your students and your patients have recognized just the impact that you've had on their lives, which brings me to my next question. Aside from your work as a psychologist, how else have you worked within your community? Because I know that's very important to you, sir.
I worked for several years with a prostate cancer support group. Volunteer work, worked with, it was invited for men with prostate cancer and their spouses. And I'll just share one story. We had one man who was 47 who had advanced prostate cancer. It had metastasized into his spine. His question to me as the moderator of the group was, how much time do I have left? And I said, well, that's an important question, and all of us have to face that at some time. But maybe the question for you is, since I know I have a finite time, what am I going to do that makes an impact with the time I have left? What are you going to do with your family, with your friends? And make that count for something in your life.
Living one's life with purpose, and finding out how you can best serve is so rewarding. I'm always caution when people ask me about how do you find your purpose, and I really am someone that believes that everyone's purpose is to serve. What our goal is to figure out what's your best way of giving service. And sir, I just think that the work that you've done has just been so admirable. But I'm going to tease you a little bit now because you are quite the Renaissance man. Let me just talk a moment about some of your hobbies and interests. You own and operate a 19th century printing press. You grow bonsai trees, and you're an amateur magician. Okay. Yes. So what led you to cultivate these unusual pastimes?
Well, that's an interesting story. It goes back to when I was a young man, even a teenager. I started working with my grandfather when I was age 10, running his printing press. Now, parents wouldn't allow their 10-year-old to do that today, probably, but he taught me the business. He ran a little shop out of his garage at his home, and I would go over there and work on weekends printing for him. When I was 14, he passed away, and we had plans. He had plans to get me a journeyman's card to become a printer, and I wanted to do that. And then when he passed away, my grandmother put me in charge of the print shop. And so I learned some valuable lessons about how to work with people, how to run a business. And so the story goes on, though. I bought a press when I was 16, and I used the press. I printed wedding invitations for people, mostly friends. And then I just stopped when I went to school. And so my printing press sat dormant for 41 years until my daughter asked me to print her wedding invitations. So I cleaned it up, and now I have it, and it's kind of a hobby. The bonsai trees go back to my mother, who encouraged me. She was interested in it, encouraged me to do it, and I've just been doing it on and off throughout my adult life. Now, magic was something that I used in ministry. I'd always been interested in magic, but that gave me a reason to use it, and I would teach Bible stories and lessons using magic as object lessons.
You know, I have to tell you, being a Renaissance man, as I call you, I call my father that also too, because he has a variety of interests. I think it really does speak to that creative spirit, but it also allows you to be interested in other people's stories. And it goes back again to what we talked about in the beginning. Dr. MacKinnon, what's the one thing you would like the viewer of this video feature to walk away with?
Well, I think that for every person, I think that all any of us ever want is to have one person in our life who understands us, who knows us, who appreciates us, and who understands our story. And so from my vantage point, psychotherapy is about being able to have a place where you can tell your story in all of its nuances, in all of its tragedies, in all of its joys, and trying to understand how you have made meaning out of that. I also would offer that I'm doing what I have been meant to do. The work that I do is what God has prepared me to do, I think.
Absolutely. You are, as my friend Oprah Winfrey once said, standing in the space that God has created for you.
Yep.
Thank you so very much, Dr. MacKinnon. It's been a pleasure to chat with you.
Thank you.